Hello, and welcome to the sixth in a series of development and support webinars delivered by the NIHR Academy. My name is Holly Viles and I work in the Academy's Development and Support Manager. This webinar, Optimising Your Energy for Peak Performance, is delivered in collaboration between the NIHR Academy and Oakridge, one of our Leadership Development Programme partners. For those joining us live, if you wish to get a copy of the slides from this webinar, there will be a link available at the end of the session to an evaluation form where you can provide us with your email address and also give your feedback on the webinar. This webinar will be facilitated by Mark Blanchard and Joe Clare, both senior consultants at Oakridge who have extensive experience working with many different organisations, teams and leaders to develop through thorough behavioural change and cultural change, and are passionate about helping people and teams to achieve their full potential. Mark and Joe, I'll hand over to you.
That's great. Thank you very much, Holly, and good afternoon, everybody. We're delighted you could join us today for our webinar. Just a couple of things to ensure you get the most out of today's webinar. As you know, you're all muted and your videos are off. So if you've got any questions, and we'll have a Q&A session towards the end of the webinar today, then please use the Q&A panel. Any other questions that you have, please use the chat. We want to get you involved. It is hopefully interaction here. So please use take part in the polls that we'll have, and also have a pen and paper ready to get involved in some of the activities. And we're recording today's webinar. So if you miss anything you want to check out afterwards, then the recording will be available. So without further ado, what we are going to be covering today is, specifically we talk about energy, but we're talking about there are different types of energy. So we're going to be looking at how you can balance that and optimize your energy holistically. We're going to introduce 4 types of energy, and we're going to try out some practical stuff that you can do to help you manage those 4 types of energy that we'll introduce. So your first interacting with us is Joe. Could you do poll number 1? So how is your energy right now on a scale of 1 to 5? So 1 being low and 5 being high.
Okay, I'm launching the poll now. It'd be great to hear how you're feeling now. So we've got about 70% now, so just keeping it open for another 5 seconds. 3, 2, 1, and we'll end the poll there. And here we can see, so we've got 52% at 3, so probably feeling okay. Small number, 5% low energy, 2% 23% at 2, 1% at 5. So one person's feeling particularly energizing at the moment, 1% of our population. Thank you very much for sharing your energy level.
That's great. Thank you, Joe. Let me just remove that off my screen. There we go. Okay, so before we look at the different types of energy, then if we reflect on if we have low energy, then really what's the impact on our performance and our well-being? If I relate to times when I've been in a meeting and I've got really low energy, then that has a significant impact on my ability to really contribute well. If I've got low energy, then I tend to be a bit more fractious at home, impacts relationships, getting frustrated, and you feel like you've got a real short fuse. Then low energy can have a real impact on us. So just some things on the screen here. So it may be, at the top there's a real high energy, but maybe you've got a lot of energy in the morning. So you're a morning person, or maybe you've got high energy in the afternoon. Maybe you need a couple of cups of coffee to get you going in the day. That's me. I'm not a morning person. I need a couple of cups of coffee, but the afternoon, then my energy starts to build. If we think about, we're sat here in webinar at lunchtime. So how was our energy? How was our morning? Do you get home at night and then fall asleep in front of the telly about 8 o'clock at night? we're currently, in a virtual existence, remote existence. So we're going from just sat in front of our laptop. How many of us turn the laptop on, open emails at 9 o'clock in the morning, and before you know it, it's 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and you wonder where the day's gone. So this can have a lot of impact on our performance. So we're going to do a poll now. So Joe, if you can open poll 2, and if you could, select the ones that resonate with you. So select all that resonate with you.
Here we go. So it may take a while to read through those. We'll perhaps leave it open a little bit longer than last time. We're looking at 30%, 40. Okay, coming up to 70% now. So let's close that. Down, 3, 2, 1. And here we have our results. So easily distracted is looking like top of the pop here at 64%, 90% at short-tempered, feeling exhausted after work, 53%. We have needing a coffee to get you going, 45%, and then working flat out in the morning and crashing in the afternoon, 35%. Thanks, Mark.
That's great. Thank you, Joe. So now we recognise that low energy has an impact on our performance and our relationships. So what can we learn from other areas to help us manage our energy and understand our energy better? There was some work's been done over the last 25 years by Dr. Jim Lower and Tony Schwartz, and they looked at elite sports athletes. So they've worked with hundreds of elite sports athletes over a 25-year period, really trying to understand how these athletes can ensure they maintain their energy. So when they actually turn up at the track meet or the match or the race, that they can actually perform at their peak because they only get one chance to do that. What they've noticed from their work in elite sports is that athletes tend to train roughly 90% of the time. So predominantly they're training. Their performance is actually a small part of their time, but they need to be ready for that when the whistle goes or the gun bangs. They have a lot of coaching support, so they've got their own personal coaches who tell them what they need to eat, what training they need to do, and manage their whole life for them to ensure that they're at peak performance when it needs to be. If you think about athletes, tennis players, golf players, then actually between championships there's quite a lot of recovery time. So they perform in a kind of a stress position for a short period of time, but then they have lengthy recovery periods. Their career could be spanning 5 to 10 years. So depending on the sport, it could be quite a short career. Hence the importance of having that peak performance on tap when they need it. The important thing that Lower and Schwartz saw was that in terms of this stress recovery period, what they also noticed is that athletes they create a habit or rituals to enable them to, on a very frequent basis, to disengage. So I'll just give you a couple of examples here. So remember the last tennis match that you saw. What did the players do in between points? We quite often see them looking at the racket, pulling the strings. If they're in between sets, then they go and they put a towel over their heads and they do something there. They're actually actively disengaging in order to manage their other energy. So athletes manage their energy holistically. And now, if you reflect on the top tennis players, then like a Sampras or a Roger Federer, how often are they throwing their rackets around and getting frustrated and shouting at the umpire between points? They don't. They seem to be very calm and collected. Athletes who can't frequently disengage pretty soon burn out. And quite often we see this with athletes that are really good at the start of a match or a race, but actually fade quite quickly afterwards because they haven't got this ritual of this disengagement. Another example here, golf. So after the golfer has actually played their shot, what are they doing as they go down the fairway? Chatting with the crowd, chatting with their caddy, chatting with their opponent, having a laugh, having a joke. they're actually disengaging between shots. So the important thing that Laura and Schwartz saw was that, yes, athletes, they're training, they've got all this coaching support, but actually built into their natural routine is this ability to recover and have this disengagement when they need it in order to maintain their energy. So, kind of that's all very well for elite athletes. What's he got to do with the workplace? So Laura Schwartz, they coined the term the corporate athlete. So what they looked at was that what's kind of happening within business, and they looked at senior executives in business, but actually we could look at it as the work-life athlete. What Laura Schwartz saw was that when we're in work, we're actually performing 90% of the time. So we're always expected to perform at our maximum. And we actually train probably less than 10% of the time. So that actual disengagement, the training and the recovery means we get very short recovery periods. We're kind of on our own unless we've got executive coaches or assigned coaching relationships. We get very little coaching support in the workplace. Yet our career spans 30 to 50 years. So if you just think about when you go on holiday, we get 20 days a year holiday. If I reflect on my personal experiences, that I don't really count a weekend as a recovery period, because I'm kind of taking pretty much most of Saturday to kind of wind down from the week, and then on Sunday I'm thinking about Monday. So I'm not really actively disengaging. And how often do you go on holiday and it takes you maybe 2 or 3 days to get into the holiday? So if you're only away for a week, then quite often you're kind of not really disengaging there. So what Laura and Schwartz saw was that based on this kind of inverse of an elite athlete, this leads to generally lower performance because people are not able to manage their energy holistically. Ultimately, fractures relationships, put pressure and strain on relationships, both at work and at home. And then ultimately, this is the cause of burnout. So there's no recovery in there. So we've got this kind of 24/7 working culture. And a badge of honor is that you're first in the office and you're last out of the office. So this is really driving this. So how do we actually manage this energy? So Laura and Schwartz developed a model which identified 4 levels of energy. So the first one is physical energy, and this is basically the fuel in the body. So what we eat, the exercise that we do. This is the cornerstone. So without physical energy, you can't actually do any of the others. So it's known as a cornerstone energy. So you need physical energy, definitely managed. The next energy is mental energy. So this enables us to focus. This results in, if you manage this effectively, good concentration, helps you prioritize things to do, and creates an optimism. So the mental energy creates an optimism if we can manage it effectively. If we don't have that, we've got this kind of sense that we're juggling things, we're spinning plates all the time. So what do we do first? We got poor memory, can have impacts on memory. We can't really focus on the task in hand, and we become less objective, which has got a knock-on impact on decision making. Third energy is emotional energy. So this is known as a quality energy. So it gives us a general positivity, enables us to avoid negative situations and manage those negative situations positively. And includes things like having family time and connection with family. So that gives us this emotional energy. With the absence of this and not managing this effectively, this is where we get a bit impatient and frustrated. We're less empathetic. We have a short fuse if we don't manage this effectively. And the final one is a deep energy. So this is known as a force energy. This is where we get our purpose, our motivation, linking with our values in here. This gives us our meaning and kind of keeps us going. A lack of this is a lack of passion. So you're not really passionate about what you're doing, which means it decreases motivation and decreases commitment. Now, I like to work in analogies. So imagine we're on a car journey. Okay, so if I equate the levels of energy to a car journey, so our physical energy is the fuel in the fuel tank. So without any petrol or diesel or electric, then we're not going to go anywhere. Regardless of how well we've got the other energies, we're not going anywhere. If we look at the mental energy, then the mental energy enabling us to focus is having a sat nav. So the sat nav is enabling us to focus on the road ahead, helping us make decisions on which way to go. So the sat nav is great. Without that, we get lost, and we're trying to juggle. I don't know whether anybody in the good old days before sat navs tried to have a map open, trying to look at a map and try to drive at the same time. Very difficult, very dangerous. Do not do it. The third energy is the emotional energy. So emotional energy in the car is you've got the family around you, you're playing I Spy with the kids, you're playing a game, you're listening to some music, you're listening to an audio book. So the emotional energy creates that climate, so that positivity, and you're really enjoying the journey. And last but not least is the deep energy. So this is giving us that source of motivation. So this is the destination. So we're on a car journey. We go to Disneyland. So Disneyland's at the end of this long road that we're on. So this gives us our motivation, our purpose. If you remove that deep energy, then basically we're sat in traffic on the motorway and we're not sure what's at the end of it, which is highly demotivating. So it has impacts on purpose there. Okay. So we are going now to just check on where you spend most of your time. Where do you focus most of your where do you focus most of your energy management? And Joe, can you open a poll for us?
I can. Here we go. Okay. So we've got about 50% response rate now. We'll leave it open for another few seconds. 3, 2, 1. So here we can see the results. So we've got 52% saying they focus most of their energy on mental energy, 20% on physical, 16% on emotional, and 12% on deep. So quite surprising, actually. I would have expected physical to be a little bit higher.
That's right, I can concur. It's the if we think about the media and what you kind of bombarded from the external environment are things like nutrition, what we should be eating, exercise. I'm one from the ready brec generation, so where breakfast was the most important meal of the day. So in terms of that physical energy management, there's lots of stuff out there. There's gyms and things we can join, signing up to classes and things like that to help with the physical. But yeah, it's interesting that mental actually comes out top, which you'd from an organisation, from a sector, from an area perspective, well-being is much more of an agenda within organisations as well. So that's maybe coming through as a reason for that, of having that support. That's great. And the next poll: where do you focus least? So that was most. So where do you focus least?
Yeah. Here we go. Okay, we're coming up to 70%, so I'll just leave the poll open for another few seconds. And poll. So sharing those results, as we can see now, deep energy, 39% not paying any attention to the deep energy, which again is probably something that we're quite used to seeing. Emotional, 35%, and of course, picking up the physical and mental, as we spoke about before. So it's interesting, the deep energy is probably one that is potentially paid the least attention to. But what Lur and Schwartz found was that actually, if you can tap into this level of energy, it's one of the most powerful, because it focuses very much on intrinsic motivation and the things that really make you want to focus on what you want to do. So I'll stop sharing that now. And what we'll do is now take you through each of those energy levels and think about what kind of activities and techniques can you take to manage that energy. And we're going to introduce you to a few ideas, ask you to try a related activity. Even if it feels a bit strange, go with it and see how it makes you feel. So what Schwartz and Lohr found, that actually, if we're focusing on a task, a complex task that needs deep concentration, the recommendation is for every 90 minutes of that focused attention, we take a 15-minute break. So we're thinking about that, as Mark talked about, that active disengagement where we really take ourselves away from work. And we know with working with many professionals that taking more breaks is often a challenge. But actually, some of the techniques we're going to introduce today may only take a couple of minutes, and a couple of minutes is better than nothing. So it's about really trying to build in some tweaks and some tactics into your daily rituals to really help you manage that productivity, so that the focus time and the attention that you're spending on that, the deep concentration, is most focused and most productive. Okay, so physical energy first. Taking care of the body, as Mark talked about. It's about what we know. It's exercise, it's nutrition, it's hydration, taking those frequent breaks. And it's about changing the physical state in the body. So we're going to do that now. So what I'm going to invite you to do is to do a full body stretch to see how that feels. And for those of you that are happy to stand up, please do. If not, my colleague Mark is going to demo a seated option as well. I'm going to stand up, so I'm just going to adjust my camera. And if we can stand up, feet firmly on the ground, stand up straight, imagine a string is holding you up and making you stand even taller. And then if we raise up on our toes, find a bit of space, make sure you've got some space, raise our arms and stretch as high as possible, really high, stretch higher, higher, and even higher. Hold for a few seconds, and then relax, bring your arms down, shake it out a bit, and take your seat. So, a simple stretching activity for a couple of minutes. How did that feel for you, Mark?
That felt really good, because if I'm sat at my computer for like an hour or two in one go, then that really, I can feel my back clicking. That sounds quite nice, and I can feel the tension going out. So yeah, that's good.
Great. And I think it's really important if we are desk-based, you know, thinking about how Mark mentioned before, we can sometimes kind of work through the day and realize, oh my gosh, it's 3 hours and I've not moved. And it's really about changing that physical state. And for those of you that are in a physical role, maybe you're in clinical practice and you are running around quite a lot and you are quite physical, it's about changing that state too. So maybe it's about building in an opportunity for a break, maybe a sit down, raising your feet up, but it's thinking about how can I change that physical state. Okay, shall we move on to mental energy now? So mental energy is managing the energy around calming the busy mind, trying to create focus and reducing our inclination to multitask. So how can we ensure that we create more focus so that our time spent on work is much more productive? We can build specific thinking time into diaries for focused activity. And for this, what we recommend is building some time in away, where possible, from where you normally do your work, or away from the distractions that can often happen. So thinking about a different environment. If you need to do some creative thinking time, one of the best environments is a green space, if possible. So trying to move your space, move your environment to create a different space for thinking. Really important here, again, is to switch off that text, those notifications. Every time we get a ding, we might get distracted and we have to refocus. And we know that that can take up to 40 minutes if we're in a deep, concentrated task. Can you restrict yourself to just checking a couple of emails twice a day? It's a challenge for us all, but I think the more that we do it, the more focused we can be in those periods in between. And really, any activity that allows you to focus on the present moment. It might be a formally organised activity like yoga, meditation, mindfulness, or something less formal, doing a jigsaw, walking, gardening, the kind of activity where you get totally absorbed. So let's go and have a go at a really great and accessible recovery ritual for our mental energy. So if you're feeling frazzled with lots to do, a short, deep breathing exercise can help you really calm your mind. So we're now going to do that. So I'm going to invite you to join in a breathing exercise. And what I would like you to do is make sure that you're seated comfortably. Make sure you've got some good posture. You feel quite straight, but you're relaxed with it, not tense, not holding yourself. Ideally, both feet firmly on the floor. And if possible, and if you feel happy to, please close your eyes and simply breathe. Gently focus your attention on your breathing. Observe each breath as it happens. Focus on the rise and fall of your chest or abdomen, or the sensation of the breath as it moves in and out. Is your breathing deep or shallow? Is your breathing long or short? Just observe your breathing as it happens. You may find your mind wandering. Simply notice that and bring your attention back to your breath. You may be distracted by noises or disturbances. Notice them and bring your attention back to your breath. You may notice sensations of different areas of your body. Again, acknowledge them and bring your attention back to your breath. Notice if your breathing begins to change. Is it quicker or slower? Shallower or deeper? Keep your focus on it. Be really aware of your next few breaths, focusing on every sensation as the breath comes in and as it flows out. Feel really connected with the present moment. And now expand your awareness from your breath into the rest of your body and the room around you. And when you feel ready to do so, open your eyes and we'll bring this exercise to a close. Okay. So hopefully that felt good and felt calming, and you were able to calm your busy mind. So how did you find that, Mark?
That was very calming. I think similar to the physical is you feel all the tension disappear, and you know, if you practice this regularly, then it's that feeling a little bit lightheaded when you come out of it, as you've from the breathing, a bit more oxygenated. One thing I'd reflect on is I'm very bad at creating habits for myself, and I find it easier to do a very short practice first thing in the morning before I even start opening emails, because I kind of, once you get into the zone, it can be difficult to get yourself out of that, to take some time out during the day. So I find in the morning it really sets me up well. Even, it doesn't have to be an hour, it doesn't have to be half an hour. It could just be 10 minutes of doing some breathing exercises. Really helps.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think what we know is that if we want to get competent at using breathing effectively to calm our mental energy, practice and regular practice is really important. There's lots of apps, free apps, etc., that you can try out these breathing exercises on. Even if you're in the middle of something where you're feeling quite frazzled, a really short 5-5-5-2 approach can help. So breathing in for 5, holding for 5, breathing out for 5, holding for 2. And even just that very short breathing exercise can really help calm and create some focus in that busy mind. I mean, we know that multitasking isn't really possible. With Schwartz did some further research and talked about cognitive overload. So when we are multitasking, we're either doing multiple things less well, or it takes longer. So really, we need to start to practice monotasking as opposed to multitasking if we really want to focus on our productivity. Really challenging in our very complex and busy world. But by understanding and appreciating, the more that we can focus on one particular task at a time, the more productive we're likely to be. So looking at our third energy, we're thinking now about emotional energy. As Mark said before, this is around that piece around helping you feel centered. So getting in touch with how you're feeling to help yourself feel less volatile, less negative, much more centered, much more positive. It's about being kind to yourself and others and showing appreciation for yourself and others. So a couple of things here we want to introduce you to. Firstly is reframing. And reframing is changing our thinking pattern. It's changing the story that we tell ourselves inside. So we're actively seeking and identifying the good, the opportunity in a problem, the benefits of potential benefits of an issue. And it's about us making that conscious choice to respond positively rather than negatively. So how can we take the author position in a situation rather than the victim position? Also, just generally doing activities that generally make us feel good. So music that we like, a comedy program that makes us laugh, some art that inspires us. A really quick activity I do at the moment when I'm working from home is I'll go and have a quick wander through the garden because I enjoy the garden. I enjoy seeing what's growing and it brings me pleasure. So a quick cant around the garden is a real kind of re-energizer for me. And finally, journaling. Journaling is a really beneficial practice to optimize emotional energy. The practice of writing something down regularly about how you're feeling can help you recognize and process your emotions. And if we can focus that journaling into writing about something positive, then it can help really supercharge our emotional energy because we're writing our feelings down, but we're also trying to focus our thinking on positivity. So one of the activities we want to ask you to share in now is think about what did you do yesterday and identify 3 things that you did that you feel really proud of. Don't have to be huge, but just something that you're so happy that you did. Write those 3 down for now. I'll give you a couple of minutes to do that. Okay, so hopefully you've all managed to identify at least a couple of things that you felt really proud about. I'm really interested now to hear about how easy or difficult you found that. So Mark, are you able to open the poll on that for us?
Mm-hmm. There we go.
So how easy was it for you to identify your 3 things that you're proud of?
Okay, 56%, 60. Okay. Okay, close the polling in 3, 2, 1. Okay, share the results. There we go.
Fantastic.
So yeah, so most people kind of in the middle there, with yeah, so 3 to 4 out of 5 really. So not really easy to come up with those positive things.
And again, it's the same as we talked about with mindfulness. It's about that ritual and practice. By doing it regularly, we will find it easier because we're effectively laying new thinking patterns, new connections, and synapses, etc., in the brain to help us think more positively generally. So why not try it on a regular basis for a couple of weeks? Just at the end of the day, have a think about what went well today, what did I achieve, and see how that feels for you. The more likely we are to think about positive things, the more likely that we're going to share positivity with others. So we call that the gratitude attitude. So the practice of feeling grateful, focusing on the positive and sharing it around. And again, from a productivity perspective, a really good journaling activity is identifying my 3 goals per day. So we're closing off in the evening or the end of the shift, however we're working, and we're thinking, what are those 3 things that I really need to achieve tomorrow? What are the 3 most essential, important things that are going to help me move forward? So by capturing them the evening before, obviously then looking at the end of the working day, did I achieve them, ticking them off hopefully, or replanning, refocusing them if required, can really help us not only feel good because we're achieving the things that are important to us, but actually it's really helping from a productivity perspective because we're focusing on the things that are really important and going to move us forward. Okay, so let's look at our final level of energy, and this is deep energy, and as Mark suggested before, this is around being concerned with your purpose, your meaning and your values. What's going on for you deep inside? It's often referred to as spiritual energy, but I like to call it deep because I think that says what it means really for me. So it's about knowing why you do what you do, identifying purpose in your work and connecting with that, knowing your own personal values and connecting with those and working in alignment with those, knowing your strengths and playing to them, because we know that when we work with our strengths, it makes us feel good because it's things that come more naturally to us, but also they energize us, they tap into that intrinsic motivation. So typically our recovery rituals here are about reflective activities, and they can obviously take some time. So identifying them, but then also thinking about, once I've identified my purpose and my values, how do I ensure that my work's more aligned to them? But we thought today we could make a start with a question, and we're going to ask you to take a few minutes to think about why you do what you do. So again, just maybe make a note of why you do what you do. We sometimes think perhaps with working in the healthcare sector and the overall purpose of NIHR, you know, making the health of the nation better, and the kind of connection with why is quite obvious. But how often do we think about doing that on an individual basis? How often do we take time to think about our purpose and that bigger picture? So Mark, are you able to relaunch the poll? And you can perhaps answer, how easy or difficult did you find that? I know we only gave you a couple of minutes, but were you able to identify that?
Okay, the poll's open.
Brilliant, thank you.
Let's leave it for a couple more seconds. Okay, 3, 2, 1. Okay, close that. Share the results.
Okay, so we've got 29% finding it fairly easy, 14% easy, and then 24% okay, but we're looking at 21 and 12% finding it a little bit more difficult. And again, if it's something that you find easy, that's brilliant. You've connected to your purpose, you've connected to your values, thinking about how can you work even more in alignment with them so that you're really optimizing that deep energy. If mainly difficult, if you're finding it difficult, then you will perhaps have to do some more reflection and think about how you can identify those values and purpose and how you can then build it more into your daily work. And there's so many exercises available on the internet to help you do that. Also, just wanting to mention that we are at the moment developing some online resources, building resilience to navigate complexity and change. And within that module, there will be some practical exercises to help you. So keep an eye out for that. And a really quick way of identifying values is think about, what are the things that annoy me in other people? What are the things that really grind my gears? If it's people that are late, or maybe dishonesty or a lack of loyalty, things that really get your gears going. And they are likely to be the things that are really important to you. So that gives you a very quick clue about where your values are. Okay, so that comes to the end of our activities. Thank you so much for joining in. I'm really interested to hear how they felt for you. And if you've got any questions, as I say, please put them into the Q&A. And I'm going to hand back over to Mark. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Joe. You'll be glad to hear it's the last poll of the session. So how would you rate your energy level right now? Are you ready, Joe?
Oh, 1 second. I'm going to launch it right now.
Thank you.
So we can see, oh, it looks like we've got some increases in the higher end of our energy here, which is good to see. So we've got 72%. Let's keep it open for a few more seconds. 3, 2, 1. And I'll end that poll there and share those results. So we can see here now, oh, 5 has increased from 1 to 4. Brilliant. And 3 and 4 have shifted, shall we say. We've got 38% at 3, which is an increase. 4 is a slight decrease. I'm conscious that it's lunchtime, so people might not have had their physical energy replenishment yet. I'll stop sharing that now. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Joe. Just have a look at, just have a think about some of those activities and anything you can do to incorporate into your daily work. I mean, just in summary, we've talked a bit about energy, its importance around performance of managing the energy is really important, relationships and performance. Introduces you to the 4 different types of energy and some tips and techniques that you can take away to start to build those rituals and those habits. We have also included some further reading. So in the record, that this is being recorded, so you can have a look afterwards. But we've referenced the work done by Lauren Schwartz and some other resources in there. And as Joe mentioned, there's a module soon to be coming to NIHR Learn as well. So with that, we shall hand over to Holly, who's going to facilitate us through the Q&A.
Thank you so much, both of you. Really interesting session. Obviously, it managed to energise people really well with some of those activities. So we've got 10 questions open at the moment, but if anyone's got any additional questions they would like to ask, please do add those in. But the question that we have got at the top, which is the most voted, is I find myself in back-to-back meetings which I don't set up. How can I create space in my day to disengage?
I think this is a really common issue, especially when your own diary is a little bit outside your control. And what I would suggest here is to block time out. So block your time in your diary so it looks like you are in another meeting, but knowing that you're doing that for good purpose to create that space in between. And another really good approach is, rather than, we generally put a meeting in for an hour, but actually by encouraging people to put 45 minutes in, it gives you that opportunity for the 15 minutes in between to give you that buffer. Anything to add there, Mark?
Yeah, the one thing is that traditionally we sit down at a meeting. There's nothing wrong with actually standing up. I mean, change your workspace that you can stand up and walk around. I've heard from, I don't know it personally, but I've heard from lots of colleagues who are able to have a wireless headset and they pace around the room, which helps with the physical energy. So there's all those kind of things. Don't think traditionally. Actually think, how can I address some of these energy areas even during the meeting? Might help.
Yeah,
That's a great question.
So potentially linking with this is that when you're working from home, you're really busy, and then it can also be very difficult to ignore email and Google chats and people kind of coming at you, wanting things from you all of the time. Mark, have you got any suggestions or advice of how people can handle that?
My hint there is depending on the tool, then use the available, not available, because quite a few of them have, you're able to change your status and being disciplined around changing your status. So if you're not available, then you're not available. And there might be a way of, I know with email, to really help the email traffic, if it's something really, really urgent, then ask the people to put in the title really urgent rather than just an FYI. So if you need to get back to it straight away, make it clear in the email title or the message title or something. Really helps you prioritize.
Great. Jo, have you got anything to add on that one?
Yeah, I think again, it's physically taking the phone, if it's your phone, out of the room, placing it away from sight can help. And I know, making sure that we leave it out the bedroom at night helps us sleep better. So I guess it's a similar principle in the day. So trying to remove it and turning off notifications on that bottom bar of the computer so that you actively have to go in and check.
Yeah. So we had a couple of questions, I think, linked to what you've just said around, meetings don't have to be the full hour, but also what you were saying in terms of, we can only kind of sit for 90 minutes and then we need to go and have a little bit of a break where possible. So should people be sticking kind of meeting times in to be under 60 minutes or under 90 minutes and kind of working that into the way that they are structuring their meetings?
I think it's about making sure that it's not so much the length of the meeting, but making sure that there's adequate breaks in the meeting. Because what we're noticing, especially when we're working from home, is that, we're needing to put more in. With, Zoom fatigue is a thing. There is something around, some research around the fact that because we're focusing in the screen, and because there's almost a barrier than there is face-to-face, we're having to concentrate even more to pick up the non-verbal clues. So Zoom, we know how it feels at the end of the day after consequent Zoom calls. So it's about making sure we're building lots of breaks in there, whether they're short 5 minutes or a good 15, 20, 30 minutes lunch break or whatever, but being really disciplined about the breaks.
Right.
Anything to add, Mark?
I'd say that what I'm building in is about every 35 minutes to have a 10-minute break. So you have a lot more breaks. But yeah, as you said, Joe, it's about being disciplined and actually having making sure people get up and go away and do something. So quite often I get people to bring back something that they bought on holiday last time, or bring back bring back something from the garden or something from the kitchen. So it proves that people are actually getting up rather than just going and doing emails in those 10 minutes, which is not the intention.
Yeah.
So thinking about breaks and recovery periods, what would you say the best recovery period for office workers is? Is there a best activity? The suggestion is annual leave. So Mark, I'll pass that on to you.
With that one, so just remember that we've got a recovery period between performance expectations. So things like weekends, evenings. So do you do something in the evening? Do you have a hobby? Do you do a sport? But it's also the recovery period during the performance. So this is the active disengagement. So what you find, if you can create rituals and habits around actively disengaging, it helps your energy generally, which means that you don't have to rely on your 2-week holiday away to be a recharge. You should be enjoying your holidays and not using them as a recharge, because you can actually build in the recharge while you're actually at work. So these little habits and these tips and techniques that we've talked about, getting those built in means that annual leave, you can actually enjoy it. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's a really good point, Mark. How many of us have used our annual leave to flop, literally flop, and I think, my experience, I absolutely love a skiing holiday. I find that really re-energizing, because I have to focus on what I'm doing so I don't go a cropper, and work can't fly into my head. Yeah, so it's about finding some practices in the evening and the weekends, and also, for those short minutes in the day I've just talked about, to really try to get away from work, so that when you're in work, you're as focused as possible.
So linking to what you've just said is, we've got someone saying that they find it really difficult to create a new habit. Have you got any tips?
Yeah, I find it really difficult to create new habits. I try and make it as easy as possible for myself. So, for example, I shared the example from the mindfulnesses. I actually do that before I start work, and I find it difficult doing it for an hour because my mind starts to wander. So just having even 10 minutes, I feel the benefit of it. So make it easy. Just start small. Start by doing 1 or 2 minutes, and then build it up from there. Once you get into it, then you get into it. The general kind of guidance is you have to do something 30 to 90 times. It depends on what the habit is you're trying to create, but 30 to 90 times before it'll get embedded. So if you're going to create a habit of mindfulness or meditation, then that's a minimum of 30 days every day for 30 days, up to 3 months, in order to get it in there. So you can see that you just need to keep doing it, but make it easy for yourself.
Yeah, I've read some research about, if you attach the new habit to an existing habit, then it's more likely to succeed. So for example, if I was going to say I want to do a quick body stretch every so often, I might attach it to when I'm boiling the kettle for my cup of coffee. Yeah, or in the morning, if I decide I want to go running every morning, I might leave my running shoes and kit by the side of my bed. So the first thing I see when I wake up is that kit. And it's kind of attaching it to a daily habit, brushing teeth, making the coffee, whatever that might be, is going to help you, because it kind of creates that reminder.
That's great, thank you. So I suppose back to what you were talking about earlier with taking some time and putting your phone away and making sure you're building those kind of rest points into the day. Someone's saying that can be really difficult when you've got multiple inboxes, lots of teams that you have to work with. They expect you to be responsive because all the things that they need to be done instantly. Is there anything you can do to manage that in a way that's going to be supportive for yourself?
I think, oh, sorry, Mark. I think having agreements with teams is really important, ways of working. So let's have a conversation about how this is going to work for us all in the best way. Because what we know is time is finite, but energy is renewable. We can renew our energy. We can do things differently that are going to support and help us. So it's having those really good open discussions with the team to say, how can we work together more effectively so that we can support each other, but do it in a way that it's not going to overload any one of us.
My quick build on that would be, make sure you double check what you think your assumption is. because quite often you receive an email which you think
Yeah.
you've got to respond to it urgently, like somebody sent it at 2 o'clock in the morning, but they haven't. They've done it because it suits them to do that, and they're not expecting an urgent response. So I just double check and make sure you're not making assumptions which are incorrect. But setting the ground rules is a really good way of helping you create some space for yourself.
Great. So we've got somebody, it's quite an open question, I think, but how can I work out what my strengths are?
Oh, I'm glad you asked this one, Holly. I love working with strengths and helping people discover their strengths. It's, you know, reflective practice can help. What are the bits of my job that I really love to do? When am I working in flow? When am I doing my best work? That can help you. And there's also some profiling tools that you can use. So a number of tools, some free tools on the internet, but also some tools that are more perhaps more robust and psychologically tested. So things like the Strength Profiler or Strength Scales are those tools that I work with and are great. And I think it's about then, how do I use these strengths in my work? Where do they show up, and how can I make sure they show up even better? And for the things that I'm not so good at, do they really matter to the work I do? If they're having a material impact on my performance, yes, I need to address them. I need to think about, do I need to learn those strengths, or can I help, get help and support from somebody else who has those strengths? Or actually, are they not having such a material effect on my work? And if so, can I not focus so much on them and work on the things that I'm really, really good at?
Great. I'll ask this question to both of you, linked to what you've just said, Jo, about reflective practice. Could you give an example for a reflective activity to optimise our deep energy?
Yep, so again, there's loads of activities around understanding our purpose and values. And one of the books actually that I recommended in the slideshow was True North, Find Your True North by Bill George. And that's a really all-encompassing, if you like, book that has some practices inside it that help you identify what's most important to you. But there's lots of stuff on the internet, but it's really about thinking what's most important, where do you feel that you're making the most difference, and as I mentioned, what does annoy you about other people can often help work out values. Anything else there, Mark? There's so much stuff on it, isn't there?
Oh, there is. I mean, if you want to check out things like Tony Robbins around the 6 basic human needs, is really good. A really simple model to, and I use it as a temperature gauge over time. So about every 6 to 12 months, I do a gauge against the 6 basic human needs just to make sure I'm actually doing things which align with my purpose. But yeah, the Tony Robbins model is really good as well. I like that.
Great. So this question, do you think it's more difficult to maintain energy levels if you don't have much autonomy in your role? So it can be difficult for you to set your daily goals yourself and have that ownership. Jo, I'll send that one to you first.
Yeah, it's difficult. I mean, we know that having autonomy in our role is really energizing because it helps us, again, tap into that intrinsic motivation. Yeah, so I think it's around trying to focus on what can you do? Can we have some conversation with the person that's setting our agenda? Can we start to discuss that as an opportunity to how might we work better together? And often, although obviously this experience of the pandemic has been dreadful, but often these kind of experiences give us a good excuse to have those conversations. Look, we're working in a new world now. We're either, perhaps we're still working from home, but we know now it's going to last so much longer than we thought, or you know, with transitioning back into work, that's going to feel different because of social distancing. So it's a good reason to have those conversations about how can we work together in a more effective way, so that I have a bit more autonomy and you get what you need from me to be reassured that I'm working and I'm focusing on what we want to focus on.
Yeah, I think my build to that would be, we've talked about 4 different levels of energy. So just assess how you're doing against the 4 levels, because you may actually find that 3 of those are within your power to manage, and it could be the purpose and the deep energy that you need some help, and it could help identify, you need to have that conversation or find a way of achieving that purpose which doesn't require that autonomy. So maybe it's doing something, an activity or a hobby or something like that, which gives you that.
Great. So quite a big question here I'm going to send to you first, Mark, is how can we encourage this mode of working as a cultural change that is accepted in the workplace?
I think as leaders, you set the tone for your teams. So if you're struggling with energy, then as leaders or contributors to teams, as team members, then you cast a shadow over the groups that you actually interact with. So that there is, if everybody is aware of the energy and how they can manage that effectively and where they're struggling, then a reach out for help of that and having those conversations. So don't struggle. One thing is to say, I've got really low energy, I'm not being able to contribute. Another thing is to think, actually, what do I need to actually be able to do this more effectively? If everyone does that, so taking personal ownership of, because your energy is very personal. Someone else can't give you energy. You've got to create that energy yourself. So raising awareness of that is really a first step. Yeah, any bills, Joe?
Yeah, I think it is what's within my control and influence. So culture is potentially, depending on the size of the organisation you're actually working in, is huge, isn't it? But what can actually I affect? What's within my sphere of influence and control? So if you're a leader and you can build that culture within your team, fantastic. If it's you as an individual collaborator and contributor, what can I do differently? How can I make sure that I'm focusing on what I need to focus on so that I can be the most productive?
Okay. So from the 4 energy level perspective, what duration would you suggest would be ideal if you were conducting a virtual event?
Yeah, we've been doing a lot of work on this, haven't we, as we've all transitioned into this online world. And actually, for me, it's about engagement and interaction. So if I am in a session online where I'm engaged and I'm interacting and I'm being included in what's going on, and I have sufficient breaks, then I can be on an online, I've been on an online event for 5-6 hours. But it's about building in different activities. So, I mean, Mark suggested before going off and getting artifacts to bring back, things like that, or going off and doing something away from it, but then coming back and reporting back in. So I think it's about building the event in a way that it brings people in to interact into the event, but also has enough breaks to give that bit of what do we call it? I've forgotten the term now. The term that we've been talking about today, distraction.
The disengagement.
The disengagement,
frequent disengagement,
exactly.
yes.
The frequent disengagement, sorry. Oh.
Yeah.
Anything to add to that, Mark?
No, it's just, the warning is if it's one way, people switch off very quickly. So creating that 2-way. Also, not just the energy, but understanding how people like to receive information. Everyone likes to receive things in different ways. So it makes it more complicated to set up and more complex, but building all these in, hopefully, helps keep the energy high and people engaged. But yeah, I've seen, courses, 3-day virtual workshops, and it is possible, but it takes a bit more setup.
Yeah.
Great, thank you. And the last question, kind of got 2 questions here, and I think very similar things that they're asking, and probably a very difficult question, but relevant to a lot of people, is thinking about how you can find time to recharge and getting sort of 10 minutes peace and thinking time when you've got distractions within your house, you've got children that you might need to look after, you're trying to work full time as well as doing the rest of your life. And I think for a lot of people at the moment, that might be feeling quite overwhelming. Just if you've got any sort of tips and suggestions of how people can manage that situation.
I think this must be one of the hardest situations to manage. I have a couple of teenagers at home, and that's hard enough, but I can't imagine how it is with the younger children. I think it's about creating, again, it's the rituals and habits. So is there time where, if you can work with your partner, if you're living with a partner, to kind of agree to take over and give each other a break? And maybe with the children, again, putting some rituals in place with them. So, right, we're going to have 10 minutes downtime. I'm going to switch on a video or the TV. Okay, it's not ideal all day, but trying to create some of those downtimes with the family as well, not just for yourself, that you can use that time to chill and as you say, find that peace.
Yeah, have a think about what you do just before you go to bed as well. Quite often people are checking electronic devices, which is proved not to be a great setup for a good night's sleep. So maybe that 10 minutes peace thinking time is actually just before you go to bed. Is it listening to, doing some mindfulness or some reflection or something like that just before you go to bed? Me personally, I find it helps doing it first thing in the morning, because I kind of get it out of the way then. So I'm at peace for the rest of the day because I know I've done it. And I can crack on and do whatever else I do, and it sets me up quite nicely for the day right at the beginning. If you've got a dog, then 10 minutes going for a walk. Find a dog, offer to take a dog out for somebody else.
That's great. Thank you both so much. Really engaging session. I'm sure people have found it really useful, and you've given us some great top tips and things to think about there.
Can I just say a call out to Becky, because I love the happy book. So Becky does a happy book, family happy book every night of the positive things. That's how they frame every day, and I think that's brilliant. So that's that kind of journaling, and that links in with Dana. Dana said, I struggled to even remember what I did yesterday. Well, the kind of journaling is write it down, and it helps do that, because I do the same. I can walk out the cinema and not even remember the film I've just watched. So that's great.
Great. Thank you both so much.
Fantastic.
Thanks, everyone.
So as I mentioned at the start of the webinar, for those of you who have joined us live, as we close the session or now in the chat, there is a link to the feedback form. And if you go on the feedback form, as well as giving us your thoughts on today's webinar, you can provide us with your email address, and then we can share a copy of the slides with you. And if you haven't signed up for our next development and support webinars, please do check out the NIHR events page, where you can find details, and recordings of all the past webinars are available on our YouTube channel under the playlist development and support webinars. So thanks all so much for joining, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your day.